Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at Asia's physical geography. Before we get started, please remember that your task here is to answer the key concept questions as they correspond with the reading, and remember that you can replay any part of this presentation that you might need for detail and clarity or repetition later. Let's go ahead and get started. The land. A geographic view. China's Wild West. The curving road went on for another 2 miles across barren rocky ground and ended at a meadow dotted with grazing yaks. We had entered a vast valley edged by a massive mountain, more shoulder than peak. Its flank half buried in the sand, the meadow had been touched by the spring, and at the seam of the whitish sand in faint new green was a village. The low houses, strung along the base of the mountain, looked as if they had been there since the beginning of time. The wild and varied landscape of the western Chinese province of Jiangxing reflects the many contrasts and paradoxes of East Asia's physical geography. East Asia encompasses high mountains, rugged highlands, long and mighty rivers, barren deserts, fertile deltas and floodplains, miles of coastline, and countless islands dotting many seas. In this section you will read about East Asia's landforms and rich and natural resources. Land and sea. The People's Republic of China makes up about 80% of the land area of East Asia and has the world's largest population, about 1.3 billion people, and counting. Of the world's countries, only Russia and Canada cover more land area than China. Mongolia, China's northern neighbor, occupies about 13% of East Asia's land, and Mongolia's population is less than 1% of China's, making the country one of the world's most sparsely populated. The rest of East Asia is shared by the countries of Japan, Taiwan, North Korea, South Korea. Hong Kong and Macau, two bustling ports of China's southern coast, were once European colonies and are now part of China. Peninsulas, islands, and seas. Along the coast of East Asia, many peninsulas and islands dot the westernmost Pacific Ocean. These landforms divide the ocean into smaller bodies of water, including the Yellow Sea, the Sea of Japan, and the East China Sea. The South China Sea, stretching from the south of the island of Taiwan to the Philippines and the peninsula of Southeast Asia, carries 1/3 of the world's shipping traffic. The Korean Peninsula juts southeast from China's Manchurian Plain, separating the Sea of Japan from the Yellow Sea. The peninsula, home to North Korea and South Korea, consists mainly of mountains surrounded by coastal plains. 4 large mountainous islands and thousands of smaller ones form the archipelago, or island chain, of Japan. Honshu is the central and largest island, with Hokkaido to the north, Kyushu and Shikoku to the south, and most of Japan's major cities are on Honshu. Surrounding Japan are the Sea of Okhotsk to the north, and the Sea of Japan and East China Sea to the west, and the Philippine Sea to the south. On the east and southeast is the Pacific Ocean. The Ring of Fire. An arc of islands east of China marks where the Pacific, Philippine, and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. These islands are part of the Ring of Fire, a circle of volcanoes bordering the Pacific Ocean. Most of these mountainous islands, including Japan and Taiwan, were formed by volcanic activity. Plate movements there cause frequent and often violent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Japan has about 50 active volcanoes and numerous hot springs formed through the volcanic activity. More than 1,000 small earthquakes shake Japan every year, and major quakes occur less often, but they may cause disastrous damage and loss of life in Japan's crowded cities. When an undersea earthquake generates a tsunami, a huge tidal wave that gets higher and higher as it approaches the coast, many lives may be lost. A tsunami that struck the Japanese island of Hokkaido in 1993 took 200 lives. Because earthquakes and tsunamis are difficult to predict, people along the Ring of Fire rely on special building methods and emergency preparedness to help reduce casualties. Next is mountains, highlands, and lowlands. Mountain ranges and highlands mark the inland regions of East Asia. Most extremely rugged highlands areas are sparsely populated and have formed barriers to the movement of the people and ideas. The region's only extensive lowland areas are China's Manchurian Plain and North China Plain. Narrow lowland plains also lie in many coastal areas. The East Asian Mountains. Numerous mountain ranges fan out from an area of high peaks and deep valleys called the Pamirs in western China. The ranges that begin in the remote interior region include the Kunlun Shan and Tian Shan. Farther north, the Atlay Mountains form a natural barrier between Mongolia and China, and to the south and the west, the world's highest mountains, the Himalaya, separate China from the South Asia. They include many peaks higher than 25,000 feet above sea level, and Mount Everest, the world's tallest peak at 29,035 feet, spans the border between China and Nepal. The Kunlun Shan bends to become the Qin Ling Mountains, crossing the central China from west to east. To the east, the lower Changbai Mountains to Manchuria extended the Korean peninsula, where they are called the Northern Mountains. Coastal plains surround the high mountain interiors of Japan and Taiwan, and Mount Fuji at 12,388 feet is a dramatic cone-shaped dormant volcano rising above the central plains of Japan's Honshu Island, also called Fujiyama. Mount Fuji is an important spiritual symbol to the Japanese people. China's plateaus, basins, and deserts. So China contains the region's most diverse landforms. The Plateau of Tibet in China's southwest quarter is East Asia's highest plateau region. Because the Chinese name for Tibet is Jiangxing, this basically means the plateau is also known as the Plateau of Jiangxing. Its average elevation is about 15,000 feet, and other rugged highlands stretch north and eastward at lower elevations, averaging 4,900 feet. In the far north, the Mongolian plateau's extensive highlands are mostly grassy pasture, ideal for grazing. Down here past the quote, broad expanses of flat wastelands include the deserts and salt marshes of the Tarim Basin, which lie between the Kunlun Shan and the Tian Shan. West of the Tarim Basin is the Talikaman Desert, a dry sandy desert, and to the northeast is another desert, the Gobi, whose frequent dust storms make life difficult in southern Mongolia. In north-central Asia, China's high interior deserts are dry and cold, and by contrast, the huge fertile Sichuan Basin between the Plateau of Tibet and North China Plain has a mild climate and long growing season, making it an important agricultural area. River systems. East Asia's rivers serve densely populated urban centers as transport routes. They provide hydroelectric power for energy, and the fertile soil for their basins is used for farming. In regards to China's rivers, China's major rivers begin in the Plateau of Tibet and flow eastward to the Pacific Ocean. The Yellow River, known in Chinese as Huanghe, is northern China's major river system. This river is called the Yellow because it carries tons of fine yellowish-brown topsoil called loess, blown by winds from the western deserts into the air and water. When deposited, the rich soil, along with water from the river, makes North China's plain a major wheat farming area. Also called China's Sorrow, and the Yellow River often floods its basin. Throughout history, it has flooded large areas, killing hundreds and thousands of people. Central China's Yangtze River, known as the Chinese as the Changjiang, as Asia's longest river, 3,965 miles. It flows through spectacular gorges and broad plains and empties into the ocean of Shanghai. The Yangtze, a major transport route, provides water for a large agricultural area. More than half of China's rice and other grains grow. When completed in 2009, the river's Three Gorges Dam will be the world's largest dam, and the Xi, or West River, is southern China's most important river system. Near the ports of Zhengzhou and Macau, the soil deposits of the Xi form a huge fertile delta, one of China's fast-developing areas. To the world's largest artificial waterway, China's Grand Canal was begun in the 400s BC. Over the centuries, and the canal has expanded and rebuilt. Today, the Grand Canal moves people and goods along 1,085-mile course of the Beijing into North Hangzhou in the south. The rivers in Japan and Korea are a little bit different. In contrast to China's long rivers, the rivers of Japan and Korea are short and swift. They flow through mountainous terrain, often forming spectacular waterfalls, and during the wet season, they provide hydroelectric power. South Korea's chief rivers flow from inland mountains westward forward to the Yellow Sea. The Han River flows through South Korea's capital, Seoul. In North Korea, the Amnak, or Yalu River, flows west, forming the border with China. And the power of wind and water can't be overstated. For centuries, East Asians have chosen building sites and designed homes using feng shui, which of course from Chinese word for the wind and water. By combining observations of the natural landscape with traditional spiritual teachings, the Chinese harmonized their buildings with the surrounding landforms, especially mountains and rivers. First used to locate favorable grave sites, feng shui is now used by architects, real estate agents, and building contractors and interior decorators worldwide. The last section here is about natural resources. East Asia's rich mineral resources are unevenly distributed. China's huge land area contains the greatest share of the widest range of minerals, including sizable reserves of iron ore, tin, tungsten, and gold. Large oil deposits lie in South China Sea and the Takuman Desert in the west. Abundant coal deposits also lie in the northeastern China section. Coal is mined in the Korean Peninsula and Mongolia, and North Korea's rich deposits of economically useful minerals include iron ore and tungsten. South Korea has relatively few mineral reserves, though large deposits of graphite are found there, and Taiwan's mineral reserves are small and its coal reserves are almost exhausted. Productive farmlands and forests are unevenly distributed in East Asia too. For example, only 10% of China's land is suitable for agriculture. The southern rice bowl yields 2 harvests per year, making China the world's leading producer of rice. With nearly 25% of its land suitable for farming, South Korea produces 2 crops per year, one of rice and one of barley, and in the prime farmland of the coastal south. By contrast, Mongolia can use less than 1% of its land for crops. Japan has also very limited farmland and poor soil. Only 1/4 of Taiwan's land is suitable for farming, but every available space is planted, chiefly with rice. Taiwan has valuable forests of cedar, hemlock, and oak. And East Asia's island countries and coastal areas depend on the sea for food. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, China all have the world's biggest deep-sea fishing industries, and China alone harvests about 18 million tons of fish each year. Seafood farming has become a major industry in East Asia. So as you guys can see, East Asia's geography is just as diverse and eclectic as its people, and understanding the relationship between land and geography and people and culture is going to be key for this entire unit. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.